On this episode of Things That Matter, I interview my friend Diego Bitencourt, and we're talking about his life in Brazil. He's Brazilian. He pastors a church in Brazil. And so we're talking about all of those kinds of things and more. So stay tuned. Hi, and welcome to this episode of Things That Matter. I'm your host, Brian Brodersen, and it is great to be with you. And I have in studio with me today my friend, Diego Bitencourt from Brazil.
Campo Grande.
Campo Grande, Brazil.
There you go.
Yes, Diego, thanks for coming.
Well, thanhanks for having me. It's a privilege to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. We met quite a few years ago now.
Yep.
And back when we met, I don't know, I never really envisioned that we would be sitting down in a studio having a conversation like this, but I'm glad we are.
I would never. So it's great.
Right. Okay. All right. So let's just talk. I want to talk about probably about three things. I want to just get a little bit about your story, your background. Yeah. And then I want to talk to you about a mutual friend of ours who had a great impact on your life as a missionary. And then want to hear from you about your pastoring a church in Campo Grande. Yeah. And I want to hear a little bit about what's happening with the church. I know personally some great things are happening. And then I want to hear too about kind of just your vision for Brazil. So, all right. So let's start with your own personal story here a little bit.
Okay. Well, I was born and raised in a city called Santos, in the state of São Paulo. And my mom was not saved. I mean, she was into literally any kind of possible religion on earth. She was Buddhist, Hare Krishna, she was like everything. And then she met my father, who used to be, he used to go to a Baptist church when he was a child, but he was not walking with the Lord back then, and then he tried to convince her of the gospel. It didn't work. And then they had a mutual friend, and he told him, can you talk to my girlfriend about the Lord? Because, this is just not working. So my mom go to talk with this guy, and then literally less than 5 minutes later, she comes back crying and saying, she was saved, she got converted. And my father asked, well, so what did you say? And the guy said, I didn't say anything. I just said, do you know that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son? So whoever believes in him, should not perish but have everlasting life. That's all I said. And she started crying.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was 2.
Yeah.
So I was raised in a Christian family, and just like children's ministry, the whole thing, with the principles, being taught the Word of God, and that was basically it. And until I got, become a teenager.
Yeah, yeah. What an amazing story, though. I mean,
I know.
That kind of just shows you two things: the power of God's Word.
Yep.
And the fact that obviously the Spirit of God there was a unique moment where the Spirit just did something with your mom.
He was definitely at work before, and there was just a moment the Lord wanted to reveal himself.
So she never looked back. She just went forward
She's
with the
still
Lord.
Walking to the Lord to this day.
That's great.
Yeah.
So you grew up in a Christian home, but do you have a point where you look back and say, yeah, this is where I really made a real commitment to Christ that changed my life? I
was about 7 years old, still children's ministry.
Yeah.
The teacher just asked who wanted to give a life to the Lord, and I said yes. And back then I really, I know that I've made a commitment. But then I was 15 or 16, it was in a retreat. I was already saved, but it was back then that I really felt that the Lord was calling me for more, and specifically, I had a hunger for His Word, and later on I understood, I was completely convinced that I was being called to teach His Word, to be in pastoral ministry.
Yeah. And you're still a teenager when you're sensing that?
Yeah. 15, 16.
Yeah, wow, that's great.
Yeah.
So then you moved to Curitiba at some point, right? Did you?
To Campo Grande.
To Campo Grande.
Yeah.
But were you never in Curitiba?
No, actually, I can tell you that story. I moved to Campo Grande.
Okay.
I was 17. My parents moved to Portugal.
To Portugal.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they look at me, a 17-year-old boy, and they look at me and ask, well, we're moving to Portugal. You're coming with us, right? And I said, I don't think so. And they look at me and ask me why. And I've been praying prior to that. I was praying, and I just knew, I didn't know why, but I knew I had to stay in Brazil.
Interesting.
I had all figured out, college in Europe, which, for a guy from Brazil, that's a huge deal. So I said, you know what? The Lord is telling me to stay. Surprisingly enough, my parents look at me, if the Lord is telling you to stay, okay, we'll go and we'll let you stay.
Yeah.
And just like months later, I was in a leadership meeting back to Calvary Chapel, São Vicente. Tim Rogers planted, and then Celso took over. You know both of them, of course. And I was in a leadership meeting. Celso had come back from Campo Grande in front of everyone without asking me first. He told the guys, me included. He said, "Oh, by the way, I just came back from Campo Grande. Diego is going to the Bible college." And I look at Celso like, "Am I?" And he said, "Well, I know you want to, right?" Because a church, Richard Semino, Metro Calvary, they've chosen to sponsor some 4 Brazilians. I was one of them. So I moved to Campo to study at the Bible college.
How did you end up at the São Vicente Church? How did?
Well, I'm from Santos, and São Vicente, I would say, is like Santa Ana and Costa Mesa.
Okay.
It's just,
Just right.
nearby,
Yeah.
So I've heard about this American guy that would teach about God's grace and verse by verse.
Right.
And I was curious about it. And I went there and I fell in love with the church, the word, the message.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I was thinking your original connection with those guys was in Curitiba, but it wasn't.
No, and then I went to the Bible college in Campo, and the director was this guy named John Wang.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So talk about Tim and John a little bit, and let's kind of set the stage here. Tim and John, Tim Rogers, John Wang. I knew both of these guys from the time they were literally like little kids.
Yeah, right.
So I remember John was 13 years old.
Wow.
He was sitting in a Bible study that I was giving, and I asked for anyone who really wanted to commit their life to Christ, and John responded.
Wow.
13 years old. So so fast forward many years later, him and Tim, they leave the States and go to Brazil as church planting missionaries.
Yep, exactly.
And what kind of impact did that have on you guys?
Huge.
Yeah.
Huge. Because Tim, not only he planted the first Calvary Chapel in Brazil, which is in São Vicente, and that's how I got connected with Calvary Chapel. He was literally my first pastor, so a great impact on just, Tim, he's just all about loving Jesus, pointing people to Jesus in a very beautiful and simple way. Yeah. And then I went to Campo, and John was the director, because John went there, as you know, not only to plant the church, but to start the Bible college, the first Bible college in Brazil. And I went there, he was the director, so I became a student for working a little bit. I graduated, and then John has a huge impact on my life because he's my mentor, or at least he was my first mentor. He's still, because not only with John I learned even more how to look to the Bible and study the Bible, but teach the Bible, because he was the one who has given me my first opportunities to actually share on a bigger audience, to a bigger audience. I had to share like prayer meetings and things like that, but he put me to teach. I was still a student at the Bible college, and he allowed me to teach at a retreat. I was terrified, but I had to say yes, because that's all I wanted to do. Yeah. And to this day,
That's great.
Yeah.
So then, again, we kind of fast forward some years, and a church had been planted in Campo.
Yeah.
But then, refresh my memory on how you transitioned into the leadership of the church.
Okay. Well, after I graduated, I had literally 3 options. One, which was the idea originally, was to go back to São Vicente, the church I came from, to help. The second one, it was that John invited me to go to Curitiba and to plant a church with him, the second Calvary Chapel in Curitiba. The third option, it was just to stay in Campo and start a community center, a social project for kids coming over here.
Right.
That was the third option, the one that I did not want. But I've made a mistake. I had to pray about it.
Yeah.
Because if I did what I wanted to do, I would have been in São Vicente or Curitiba. But, Aline and I, we had just got married, and we thought, let's just pray about God's will. And he clearly, in a certain way, told us, he convicted us to stay. John planted. The transition was not easy because, I'll just put it this way. I was the 4th pastor in 4 years.
Yeah.
And there's this elderly lady at our church. They're still there. They're pillars at our church. The guy's part of my board. My first Sunday, when I became the pastor, I was 22 to 23. I look at her and she asked me, so when are you leaving? I was a 23-year-old guy, Start pastoring, knew nothing, still don't know much, but I knew less.
Yeah.
And she looked at me, how long are you staying? And I've been there for the last 8 years pastoring this church.
Yeah. So that spoke to you when she asked that question. You knew that there was something.
Oh, yeah.
There was a need for
definitely
consistency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perseverance.
Yeah. So you and I were talking earlier. We're trying to remember the last time I was in Brazil. And the last time I was in Brazil, I think you were just starting really as the pastor of the church.
I think you're right. If he was 2010. Yeah, because I started pastoring that church Easter 2010.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was probably
right about that time. Yeah. Now I haven't been back for these years, but of course, we're still connected, and I get reports. But and I actually saw a fantastic video.
Did you watch it
of
already?
The church service? Yeah. So tell us about so 8 years digging in. Talk a little bit about these cities you mentioned. You mentioned São Vicente. You mentioned Sao Paulo. You mentioned Curitiba. What are these places like, and what's Campo like in comparison?
Yeah, well, São Vicente or Santos, the whole area, you're talking about a very urban area, over 1 million people. Curitiba, I think I would say around 2 to almost 3 million people.
Yeah.
Campo is 90,000.
90,000.
And very agricultural environment.
Okay.
Rural area mindset.
Yeah.
So it's completely different from what I was used to.
Yeah.
I did not feel, at first, I did not feel comfortable on that environment. I'm more like an urban guy.
Yeah.
And then I moved there.
Yeah.
And the Lord uses our wives. So on the first year, I have to confess, I was just complaining. I mean, before I start pastoring the church, the first year that I moved to Campo. And then my wife looked at me and, when are you going to start to complain? And when you're going to be faithful to the place the Lord has called us? I'm like,
wives are
didn't
good
see
at
that coming.
Yeah.
Right? And that kind of changed the perspective.
Yeah.
I love the city.
Yeah.
I love the church. I love the people. I love everything about it.
And it's a great place. And,
It is.
90,000 people.
It's almost 100 now.
Yeah, and
97,000.
My first church that I was pastoring, the city that I was in had 24,000 people.
Wow.
My first church, but it was connected to another city with 20,000 and another city with 30,000. So in the vicinity, there were probably about 60, 70,000 people.
Yeah, for Brazilian perspective, under 100,000, it's considered to be small.
Small, yeah.
Yeah, small to medium.
Yeah.
So it's not like
you got
irrelevant. If you're thinking about strategy, the reality is maybe Campo would not be a place that you would just go.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think generally you think in terms of, for strategy.
Yeah.
You want to go to the cities, you want to go to the places where the people are, so you can spread out. And God certainly leads people to do that at times. But even in the book of Acts, which I'm currently teaching, you find that, Paul's targeting those places, but every once in a while he ends up in a place that you're like, okay, well, that wasn't, like a Berea or somewhere like that, that wasn't that significant of a place. We had this experience in Hungary years ago where we eventually would end up in Budapest with a great church in the heart of the city, but we started in a, like you described, Campo, we started in a place just like that. Hardly anybody in Hungary even knew this place existed, let alone
in Brazil too. When you talk about Campo, in Brazil, when I say, when I'm from, I have to say, well, it's close to Maringá, which is a bigger city, but and it just, it's such an encouragement, to see what the Lord is doing, and it's a proof that it's His hands.
Yeah. So just give us kind of just an overview of what's happening with the church right now.
Okay. Yeah. So I started pastoring this church. We had about 20 to 30 people, and all I knew I had to do was just to be faithful, to God's word, and that He would honor His word. After 8 years, the Lord has been so gracious to us, not only talking about the city, because the church grew and He keeps adding people to our congregation, but in a way that we still cannot explain, and we've talked a little bit about that, but He somehow, from Campo and from this church, He's giving us somehow a voice, like in Brazil, and to different churches, different denominations. I'm so privileged that I have my Baptist friends and Presbyterians and Methodists, and I get to teach on these different churches and be part of church plant movements, So it's more like the local church, the Lord is blessing a lot, but what He's doing through the church and beyond, it's...
So what are you seeing as far as new converts? Because, you start out with 20. You guys have a few hundred people at this point, right?
Yeah.
And how many of those people would you say have actually come to Christ through the influence of the ministry there?
I would say that at least half of our church.
Great.
Yeah, of course there are people that, they came from other churches somehow, or they were just not walking with the Lord for a while. But we've been seeing that the Lord is just saving a lot of people, and especially young people. He's been graciously giving us some opportunities to, with the millennials. I would say one third of our church, it's college age, like 18 to 25.
So looking at Brazil and thinking about the gospel in Brazil, what are you praying about? What are you envisioning? What do you see God doing in the days ahead?
All I've been praying about, and all we've been, making efforts and starting to see already happening, the vision the Lord has given is that through Campo, and as unusual as it is, and it's starting to happen now, we want to plant churches. Like literally, I don't want to sound like megalomaniac or something. We want to plant churches throughout the whole country, and that's the vision, like Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria. And we're helping to plant 2 churches now, one close to Londrina, which is in our state, another one in São Paulo. And I'm trying to invest, although I'm a young pastor, I'm trying to invest on, the younger generation so that we can send people out.
Yeah. Are you 30 yet?
I'm 31.
31.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's a church plan. I was talking with this guy just before our interview. The way we see the New Testament, it's all about church plan. And Paul is writing letters to different churches. So the story of the gospel expansion is basically how churches were being planted, and that community, that people, and that city impacted the whole world.
And you guys are, and the Lord's kind of opened up some doors. You mentioned it already, but I want to go back to it for a second, with some really great collaboration with other guys. So it's not just, kind of limited to just this particular, community of churches, but it's God's kind of giving you this cross-pollination with these different guys and opening up some really encouraging doors.
Yeah, somehow the Lord just opened these doors with, not only, in our region, but literally throughout the country.
Throughout the country, yeah.
With, different churches and key leaders in Brazil.
Yeah.
Seasoned pastors that somehow would look at our church and to ourselves and say, you know what, just come closer.
Yeah, yeah. And so our mutual friend, John Wang. So John spent 10 years in Brazil.
Yeah, he did.
And of course he's married to a Brazilian, Flavia. And, John's been back here now, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah, I think he said 7 years.
7 years,
I was surprised, yeah.
Yeah, and but recently he's kind of been re-engaging in Brazil. And it's really fascinating how God's kind of opened a new door for John as well, right? And kind of, with some of these guys that have maybe even more of a national voice, they've sort of taken interest in John's ministry. He was there for years. He speaks the language. Of course, he's an excellent Bible teacher. So I look at all of that and I think, wow, we could be, on the threshold of some really exciting things.
I totally believe that, Brian.
Yeah.
I totally believe. I know that sometimes we might have this tendency to just be positive and think, better things I had.
Yeah.
I believe that with all my heart.
I can see it happening, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Now, one last thing I want to say, because, probably, lots of people that are going to watch this are going to be people who might even be candidates for the mission field.
Wow. Yeah.
So you had 2 missionary guys from America that radically impacted not just your life, but we could get a whole group of guys in here, your age, that they had a tremendous impact on, right? Do you still feel like there's room for missions? You feel like there's room for guys coming from the outside and coming in?
Oh, I do. If you're just passionate, for God, for His Word, for the lost.
Yeah.
And if the Lord is putting Brazil in your heart, just come.
Yeah.
Just come and let's just preach the gospel and plant new churches and gospel-centered churches,
And, just on a personal note, my experiences in Brazil have been wonderful. I love, the people are fantastic. The people are open, too.
They're
open to the gospel.
Yeah.
And the culture is amazing. It's a beautiful country, right?
It is.
Yeah, beautiful. And the food is fabulous.
I don't doubt it. Especially the churrasco.
That's
the barbecue.
The barbecue, yeah. All right. Diego, thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you so much, Brian.
Yeah, it's great to see you, and looking forward to more things ahead as we follow the Lord.
All right. Thanks for having me. It was really a privilege.
Good. Awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for joining us today. And it's great to have you with us. I hope that this conversation has been an encouragement to you. I hope it's been helpful. And, maybe you're talking to our audience here in the States or, English-speaking world. Maybe you've had missions on your heart. Maybe you've had Brazil on your heart. And so pray about it and, see what the Lord will do. You never know what God might do through your life, touching somebody else's life that would then in turn touch many lives. So again, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. God bless.